It's a beautiful Friday morning in the city of Lagos, southwest Nigeria. My name is Dablala Ogunshakin. And this morning, I'll be reviewing the front pages of the dailies and also analyzing it with my guest. Of course, for the paper review, I'm starting with Vanguard. Vanguard this morning is leading with 133 million Nigerians poor. That's according to NBS. North, 85 million. South, 47 million. 66.5 million children are poor. Sokoto State tops with 91% poverty rate. Ondo State least poor with 27%. Federal government will use report to allocate resources. That's coming from President Muhammadu Buhari. NBS poverty report not contestable. That's coming from NECA. APC leaving behind poverty legacy. That's from PDP campaign. And you can see that story on page 5 of Vanguard newspaper. On page 34, we have Tinubu to Southeast. Stop complaining. I will address your grievances. You can see that story on page 34. Zenith Tech Fair to attract global IT practitioners. You can see that on page 19. Nigeria to produce additional 255,000 BDP as SNEPCO completes maintenance. We have on page 7, Naira redesign, more governors now on that EFCC watch. That's coming from Power. 2023, governors to blame for violence. That's coming from the Inspector General of Police. United States threatens visa ban on election riggers, backs adoption of BVAS. And stories above, on page 7, we have insecurity. Nigerians suffering, weeping, wailing, and mourning. That's coming from Munguno. You can see that on page 7. Soludo, other critics from your state envious. Wicked Labour Party tell Obi. UTM offshore, JGC, Technip Energy sign agreement on Nigeria's FLNG. You can see that on page 10. And we have federal government says debt sustainability threatened by low revenue. You can see that on page 19 of the Vanguard newspaper. And away from there, let's move to the Guardian newspaper. The Guardian this morning is leading with 133 million Nigerians remain poor despite sharing $700 million Abacha loot. 25.3 million Nigerians face acute food and nutrition insecurity in 2023. UNICEF, over 40 million children in Nigeria face acute malnutrition. PDP carpet APC over NBS report says a majority of Nigerians excluded from intervention schemes. You can see that on page 6. And below we have on the road to Qatar 2022 World Cup without Nigeria. You can read that big story on pages 4 and 5. And lastly, on the front page of the Guardian newspaper, we have relief as Lagos Airport restores a runway light 14 years after. You can see that on page 20 of the Guardian. Away from there, let's move to the Nation. And of course, the Nation is leading with security chiefs. Wike attacks Atiku for criticizing Buhari. Rivers governor vows to remain in PDP, fight vultures as scavengers. Obi outlines plans. And here there's a quote. It reads, some people now are criticizing Buhari for appointing all the service chiefs from the north. Why did they not challenge Buhari since election has come and they are talking? You can see that on page 5. And moving on, First Lady, governor's wife rally for Tinubu and Chetima in Ilorin. You can see that on page 4. And lastly on the Nation, why we dumped a 20 billion naira case against government by Kanu's lawyer. You can see that on page 5 of the Nation. And lastly, let's see what the Punch is leading with. The Punch is leading with Hoodlums attack. Federal government deploys soldiers, DSS, in INEC offices nationwide. Security team to be drawn from Army, Police, DSS, NS, CDC, and Fire Service. Governors using thugs, state security outfits to cause violence. Inspector General cries out. United States threatens to sanction candidates. Politicians sponsoring violent campaigns. And other stories can be seen on page 2 of the Punch newspaper. And on pages 4 and 5, there's a story that says, Ataga, I was forced to sign prepared police statement, says Chidima. 11 billion naira addition to defense budget uncovered, Minister queried. You can see that story on page 14. And lastly, on the Punch, on page 24, naira depreciation, inflation erode workers 24 workers at 25 trillion naira salaries. You can see that story on page 24 of the Punch newspaper. And that's all we have on the front pages of the dailies this morning. Join us after the break as we interview our guests. All right, welcome back. If you are just joining me, this is Today in the News on Vanguard Live. I'm Damlola Ogunshaki. Joining me to analyze the stories this morning is Dr. Tayo Obateru. He's a journalist and a lecturer at the Mass Communication Department, Unijos. Good morning, Dr. Tayo.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you very much. And this morning, at least we have almost all the papers leading with this report from NBS showing that 133 million Nigerians are poor. What do you think about this report?
Well, it's a very damning report in terms of the level we are in as a nation, especially a nation that is so blessed with resources. For about 70%, over 63% of Nigerians to be living in poverty is a very terrible thing. Although we are not surprised because it's very obvious, we can see it all over. But it says a lot about the kind of leadership that we have. How can we be so blessed and yet we're this down? All the multi-dimensional index, poverty index that were used. And let's not also forget that it's not just the NBS. The NBS compiled it and presented it, but it did it in collaboration with international bodies like the UN. About 2 or 3 UN agencies were involved. So it gives it a lot of credibility and says a lot about what we are going through. When 70% of our people live in the rural areas and they are living in abject poverty, it is very terrible. Yet we have some people who live in extreme goodness or richness. They are so rich and they are in luxury. They are living in extreme luxury and they are enjoying so much. Yet the majority of the people suffering like this, I don't know what they feel. And then the question that arises again is comments from year to year talk about spending millions on poverty alleviation schemes. What is the result of that if we still have this level of poverty in the country? So it is very disturbing, and it is a challenge to our leaders to really stop pretending about addressing issues, because it shows that whatever they think they are doing is not having the desired effect. If we still have so much of our people living in abject poverty. So it's a very damning report, and not good for us at all.
All right, there are some questions people are asking. Despite the $700 million Abacha loot that was brought to Nigeria and distributed, according to what we heard, Nigerians are still poor. Majority of Nigerians are still poor.
Well, for me, this is a product of research, and it is very credible. And as a researcher myself, I think the data that the research generated says a lot as to whether the money that are being deployed to addressing poverty is really achieving anything. So we begin to ask, is the claim of some of this money being related really true? Because if we're not seeing the effect of the so-called budgetary allocations or the deployment of money to some areas to address poverty, then we should ask questions. Why should our leaders be living large, and while the majority of the people are living in abject poverty? It raises a lot of questions about our leadership, and I think that they should have some reflections and see whether they are really doing what they're supposed to be doing.
All right, with this report, President Muhammadu Buhari has restated his unwavering commitment to eradicating poverty in the country, added that MPI reports will be used to influence the allocation of resources going forward, particularly to target sectors where most citizens suffer. What do you think about what the president is saying?
Well, let's hope. But when does he want to do that? When he has just barely 6 months to leave the office. He's been there for 7 years, and from year to year they've been making allocations. I think our leaders should stop pretending, because let us not live by promises any longer. Let us live by action. What we see, not what they are promising us, because we have seen a lot of promises, but we're still where we are right now. So what is the essence of those promises that don't translate into an improvement in the life of the people? So we let them stop the rhetorics and let them begin to act. But I cannot see what he intends to achieve when it's just you had 8 years and you're already in 7 years and the situation is still like this. You are still promising that you are going to do a lot within 6 months. I doubt if he's going to be able to achieve anything if he was not able to do it in 7 years.
All right, let's move on. And of course, election is coming, and one of the worries of the people is, of course, election rigging and the violence. And now, the Inspector General of Police, Usman Akali Baba, yesterday at a meeting with political parties, said that he has been receiving reports of some state governors who encourage political thugs and some national security outfits under their control to disrupt and seamless and statutory guaranteed campaign activities of parties. What do you think about this? I mean, in other words, it's saying the governors are to blame for this violence.
It's no secret that a lot of our governors are dictators. They just pretend to be Democrats. A lot of the so-called BAs that they employ are actually political thugs that they use to harass opponents and to do some of this violence that we're talking about. It's a fact, and unless something is put in place, I think they are capitalizing on the immunity that they are enjoying to misbehave and do what they like. Because you can see that in all the states and across all the parties, wherever a governor is, he does not want to brook any form of dissent, political dissent. They want everybody to follow their own party, and they want to have their way. Even within their party, they oppress those who oppose them and just push things, railroad them, their intentions or their will, and have their way. And where they can't have it based on the will of the people, they use their thugs to either intimidate or to attack the people. So it is true. And like the IGP suggested, I think it is time that INEC should really penalize the politicians who engage in forgery and other forms of violence to have their way. Until we have a way of checking them, this will continue. And it just shows that our democracy is not growing, because it also means that the will of the people will always be truncated when you use violence to either intimidate the people or scare the people away. So the IGP is right. But also, I think it's also within his power. Even if you cannot arrest a governor, you can arrest the perpetrators, the thugs being used, and deal with them. And if the thugs are arrested and treated accordingly, of course, there will be a rethink. Because even if you are not arresting the governor, those people don't enjoy immunity. And the IGP also has a duty to ensure that they checkmate the activities of these thugs. They cannot be more powerful than the police. And so the police has a role to play in ensuring that we check some of these activities.
Do you think, I mean, 2023 is very close, just a month, we are just a month into entering the 2023, and I think 90-something days now to the election. Do you think INEC can provide a solution that will work ahead of this election?
Well, INEC is not an enforcement agency. It can only sanction when it gets evidence, and that is why I was saying that the police has a duty. The police and other security agencies have a duty to assist INEC to achieve the essence of the election, that is making the election credible and making it a true reflection of the will of the people. If the clocks continue to have their way and there's nothing that is done, there's little INEC can do, because INEC will only act on clear cases that come before it, and that can help in a way. But overall, what is important is to checkmate the activities of thugs that the governments deploy to go and do hatchet jobs for them.
All right, it seems part of the ways to solve this is what the United States government, the United States government is actually, giving to Nigeria, as they have said that as they have threatened to sanction anyone who interferes with the democratic process or instigates violence in the 2023 general elections. I mean, in Nigeria, we all want to japa, and not just that, including our politicians, going out for treatment. Do you think this will work?
It can work if they're really committed to it. But the question is, they've been making this stress from year to year. When we have elections, they make this stress, and in some cases, they actually carries out the sanctions. Some of them by denying them visas or their families. So it is good, but they need to do more because we seem incapable of checking some of these activities internally, and so we may need external assistance. So if a government, for instance, knows that if he instigates the violence or tries to create democracy or the democratic process, it's going to affect himself and his family in terms of being able to travel outside the country or some of the sanctions that they have threatened to impose. It will help us and it will serve as a deterrent to some of these governors who who behave above the law and do things the way they like. So since we don't seem to have sufficient internal mechanisms to check some of this, the assistance of foreign countries and agencies will really be helpful to serve as a deterrent to some of these misbehaving politicians.
How will BVAS, help in this upcoming election?
BVAS is a very good innovation because it uses people's biometrics to check whether they are the true people. One, it will not only check multiple voting, it will also ensure that cases of underage voting and impersonation in voting will be checked. But the question that arises is, will they allow you to work? Will they allow you to work? Will the politicians allow you to work? Our politicians are experts in circumventing rules, and no matter how well intended a policy is, they always find a way of sabotaging it. So it is now up to INEC to ensure that it does not bend its commitment in terms of the usage of the BVAS for accreditation purposes.